Okay, great. Well, again, first and foremost, again, as always, pleasure for me to, be in fellowship with everyone. And I think that based on what has happened this week in Philadelphia, there's been, just so much, energy, in reference to, dealing with, the issue of Bill Cosby. But what I want to do is first and foremost just ask the question, are there any questions from last week that anyone may have in terms of our dialogue? And if so, we can address that. And then if not, we can, kind of move, with the spirit, in terms of what's on our hearts and minds.
Okay.
So are there be any questions for last week?
No.
Okay. And then okay, I know that, Pastor Richard was talking about forgiveness. And at the same time, in reference to all what has occurred in Philadelphia, and not just only with Bill Cosby, but I was thinking about the Starburst incident that happened in Philadelphia also, I guess the previous week. And there's been a lot of demonstrations, a lot of energy again, just coming out in terms of just how people feel, in terms of justice, and we had also the rapper that was released from jail.
Okay.
And I'm trying to recall his name.
Meek Mills or something?
Yes.
Yeah, right. And so again, a lot of energy in terms of when he was released, he kind of, went right to one of the 76ers games, the professional basketball team. And so, I mean, there's so much is going on, I think not only in Philly, but all over the world. And I just wanted to kind of, maybe lead into the dialogue today, in terms of, again, first and foremost with Bill Cosby, because it really impacted on me personally, only because, growing up in Philadelphia, Bill Cosby has sort of been one of the icons, in terms of the community that we all grew up in North Philadelphia.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm mentioning this because I know of the good, that he has done in terms of helping humanity and mankind. And at the same time, the particular Boys and Girls Club that I grew up in was a club that he, was involved with, years earlier. But still, you hear the names, you hear the good, but then at the same time as we now, see what's occurring in the now, it kind of saddens me, to, hear the decision that was made in terms of all three accounts guilty, but at the same time, it's the reality, in terms of how do we forgive. And so I think the question, that comes to my mind, is in terms of, with him being guilty, to appreciate the feminine energy and appreciate, the women who felt justice being done, with regards to what they had encountered or experienced. And so I'm hoping that this is just, again, another way that we can appreciate seeing things coming to the light in terms of those things that may have been hidden or may have been suppressed. But I think that it's, again, another time and season that we're living in that I'm really happy that, that freedom, that, the women who encountered, the sexual assault thought that justice was given. And watching it again, and I'll just open up for questions in a minute, that my concern is, to relinquish, that in which the women had felt, but again, there were some who spoke in terms of, in my opinion, in terms of not wanting to retaliate or have vengeance. But again, it all depends on, like you say, where we all are in terms of forgiveness, or where we all are in terms of, the women being able to feel good about the fact that the verdict was what it was. So I just wanted to, first and foremost, just start out in terms of just how, do we look at it, or maybe what other people's opinions are about what occurred. Are there any opinions that people have about that?
Well, George, I would like to say I felt saddened too, and I mean, out of all the things that have happened in the universe, and the first time with him going to court, I didn't feel anything then. But right at what this verdict that they came up with, this one really touched me. And I like you, I was sad about it. It's like, I don't know what else to say. It just hurts. That's all I can say. That really touched me. And I don't know what he's done for Philly. I mean, I know you just mentioned a few things, but I know he's did a lot for African Americans. But that really hurt, and I don't know why.
I have a comment. I'd like to make a comment. My grandson asked me about that, and this is kind of the way I put it to him like this. We all have things that we're probably ashamed of, that we've all done wrong, but that we have to remember. Well, what I told him is we should take the good from him. He taught us that, you know, he showed on TV that blacks were families.
Right.
He supported a lot of things, even though he may have, quote, unquote, this kind of sickness. But we all have issues inside we have to deal with, and they eventually do come to light, be it publicly or just in our own awareness, and we have to remember that. To remember to take the good to learn from it and know that we all struggle with something. I think that's kind of the thing. We shouldn't let the media just tear down that this man was a nothing, nobody, because that's not true.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and again, I appreciate, you know, your comments, because as I said before, you know, going to Temple myself, you know, some of my scholarship was from Bill Cosby. And at the same time, when Bill Cosby was coming to the Kimmel Center, for those of you, you know, who know that I do, you know, work there also in terms of, you know, with the security. So during the Marian Anderson Awards, I had the opportunity to be with Mr. Cosby. And the most important thing is, again, I know that his blindness and his you know, his situation of what it was, but I think the important thing, again, is I saw some good, but then I still have to realize that, you know, there's things that we've all done. And so when looking at the scriptures where it talks about, you know, forgiveness, you know, I wanted to try to at least, you know, again, bring that up in terms of how we all deal with it. And so, you know, I know our prayers, you know, are extended, you know, to everyone. But I think that there's still, you know, a time where, you know, people, you know, felt that they were received justice, you know, for what had occurred. So, you know, again, I just wanted to just share those thoughts. But how many times does the Bible say, shall we forgive? But at the same time, again, when a person is going through those hardships or going through those crucibles, I just saw some things in terms of just some of the people reacting, where some, I think, were remorseful. I think some felt, you know, again, for him, but at the same time, justice was there. And then there were others, you know, who, you know, was real malice about it, you know, in terms of, you know, just wanting to, I mean, you know, just throw the hammer to the point where, you know, let him, you know, be locked up, you know, for you know, for 30 years. I think it's 3 accounts, you know, that he was, you know, sentenced for. So, you know, again, you know, in the universe and in the macro, we're beginning to see things come to the light. But as some of you were saying, that this happened so long ago, where, in terms of how his attorneys and how it all played out, you know, just something to give thought to. But when I was talking to Pastor about it, you know, he was just talking about the mentality of taking on, you know, the mindset of the system. And when I say the system in terms of just how, you know, our ancestors, you know, in terms of slavery were treated, in terms of being raped, you know, being sexually assaulted, and how that, you know, male macho mentality, you know, could have had some effect, you know, in terms of just what people think that they can get away with. And it's coming to the point, you know, where that's, you know, not, you know, the case. So, you know, how do we proceed from here, you know, what happens? But I think it's just something that, in terms of current events, that I just wanted to bring up this morning when we talk about forgiveness and where we are. So any other questions that people may have at this point?
I don't have a question. I
I'm wondering about something, and it's
Okay.
I mean, he's the first one that's been tried and found guilty. I mean, I wonder how many others are going to be tried. You know, because I mean, it seems like, well, we'll see as things unfold in the next months and years. But it seems like somebody of color always has to be the sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about that because I don't think any of the other people there's been a case against them in any other way except in the public view.
Well, I think, not just in terms of, Bill Cosby. I mean, we look at, the rapper, Malik, and again, someone mentioned, yeah, in terms of, the police officer who basically, told, he lies, you know what I mean, about his situation, which caused him to be able to, to be released. But there's things that happen when we talk about, working with the law, and that's just, another point I wanted to bring up. When we talk about working with the law, are we talking about the law in terms of the judicial system, the law of the government, or how do we look at it in terms of working with the law in terms of renewing the right spirit within us, in terms of how we deal, with the law? So, something that, again, I'm just, in prayer meditation about, to be able to not just look at it, in terms of the judicial system, but what is the right thing to do, or how can we, forgive, but yet and still, appreciate, renewing the right spirit in terms of how we think and what we do. And I'm sure, like I said, there's many situations that, we see or we may read about, but I think it's important that we have the discussion, like we are, because there's a lot of, like say, children or youth and people who are, are perplexed about seeing the negative being more publicized, but at the same time, again, we, may sometimes forget about the bad. So I don't know if this is a situation where that's the case. So do we, how do people see it, yourself? I mean, again, I think we talked about it, but, we got to begin to appreciate, the law of thinking from a spiritual perspective, that we can hopefully see the, the unification in terms of the respect that we need to have for one another.
Well,
And I think that's what, but I'm sorry.
I was going to say, why is this unfolding starting in Philly? Like,
I'll say it again.
why is this starting to unfold in Philly, like with Bill Cosby, the census and everything?
Well, again, I think in terms of when we were meeting, and I know that the, when the teachers came up, and we've been in prayer about, things coming to the light. And I know that here, there's been a lot of things that has transpired since the time, that the teachers came up in South Carolina. And, I know that as it comes to the light, we still have to make that connection to be able to see where it originated from. So a lot of times when I hear Pastor, Richard and everyone talk about, South Carolina being, the original place of slavery from a standpoint of how our ancestors, were enslaved and then moved to the north. And so I think that there's much more that's starting to come to the light that we hopefully can appreciate in terms of being able to see a unity, in terms of our journeys and our relationships together, and how does that impact on our youth. How does it impact on mass incarceration? How does it impact on mental health thinking? How does it impact on, just, our living? So, it's important that, that we can at least acknowledge it where we need to, because I think people are asking questions. So I believe that the pot has been stirred up here, and there's a lot of things that are happening, but I think it still connects to, our heritage, and I think it still connects to our roots in South Carolina, or, in the Carolinas.
I think it connects also to the changes we need to see in the justice system. And I think I think there are 2 congressmen from Pennsylvania that are resigning, aren't they?
Yes.
I think that's all connected in there too, in terms of justice reform and there's just a reckoning of getting things to come back around to righteousness, for lack of a better word. And I think too, this thing with the rapper, where the charges were basically dropped against him, but he's still tied up in the legal system. Why? I mean, you can just see the unfairness of it against the person of color. So I think there's just a reckoning that has to take place there. The city of brotherly love, or whatever.
So much for brotherly love.
So yeah, I mean, it has to. Yeah, I see the symbolism of it having to happen there, so that it can then spread.
Yeah, and Audrey, I appreciate you sharing that, because I believe that it is, when we talk about Philadelphia, the city of freedom, I think that there's just so much emphasis now with the new district attorney that we have. And I was just thinking about the gentleman, Seth Williams, who were our former DA, and how he was charged, in terms of just some things that he's done that, wasn't, with the law. And so things are happening, where the judicial system is really, being questioned, being judged, and working, with young adults in terms of even the situation with, the marijuana laws. There's things where people are now, looking at being released, and these persons are coming, from prison back into society. And so I think it's a situation, again, where we have to, begin to appreciate, how do we, deal with the re-entry, to the point that people can appreciate their freedom, but like you say, in terms of that connection. So if Philadelphia is going through this transformation, in terms of, dealing with the law, as it is written, but how do we, change the law? And I'm saying not so much in terms of just the set of rules that the judicial system have, but the laws that we know in our hearts, or the laws that we know that can empower our families or individuals, where they don't, totally be, bombarded or totally be confused in terms of how to live in the world and not be of it.
Well, I think you pretty much hit it on the head a few minutes ago when you talked about forgiveness, because, and that kind of dovetails back around to what you were discussing a couple of months ago about, and you just mentioned earlier, renewing a right spirit. And I think that comes by forgiveness, because if we forgive, then we can look at the situation from an objective point of view, and we realize people, you have to live with the consequences of your actions, but still we can forgive and look at the situation in a more objective way, and not, and not hold that person in such a place as to think, they are not of the Creator, because they are. They still are. So when we forgive, we renew that right spirit in us.
Yes. And I think an example, of this particular situation for me is like when I'm working with some of the young adults in our Choice of Yours program, through the city, we have, young people, who were engaged in selling drugs. We have, young people that, were engaged in terms of not working with the law, but against the law. But at the same time, again, there's other, issues, of hardships and family dynamics, that to get people to understand how to work with the law. And I'm not saying in terms of just the laws of the government, but, working with the law in terms of them coming to the knowledge of knowing who they are. But for some of them, it's hard to make that decision to stop selling drugs or to stop using drugs. But that's an area that we really have to look at, because a lot of our young adults, unfortunately, those who are caught up in the judicial system, don't have like a clean run. So a lot of times they can't even get jobs because that's the area, of need that needs to be focused on. I think there are jobs out there, but I think you're saying, Arby, again, how do we deal with the spirit, the spirit, man? How do we deal with, the soul? How do we deal with the mental thinking versus just, the physical, mechanical things that people do? So I think there's some work to be done, but I believe that this is the, the connection, that I truly feel in terms of our North and South connection, that we all, go through, situations of dealing with children, but how do we, get them, to see that it can change? And so it's work in process, but I believe that through our conversations, in the podcast, it's helping me, to appreciate, the beginning. When we talk about that, it just didn't all start, here in Philadelphia, but we can reconnect to our beginnings and our roots, to appreciate, what the struggles have been, but now we're being able to see, hopefully the deliverance, and freedom, from the entrapment of, the justice system.
Well, I have a question.
So,
the guy in Vermont did they let him go? The guy that was had threatened to shoot all the kids at school, do a school shooting. Did I see that correctly on the news?
Oh yeah, there was. I know that was locally.
Well, was something happened in Vermont with this guy? I didn't really watch the news this week.
Yeah.
Something happened, and I think the guy had threatened to go into school and shoot everybody up or whatever, and they dropped the charges against him or something because he didn't follow through with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But we know things happen. And depending sometimes, where the arraignment or where the court may take place, that can make also a big difference. Because in Norristown, where Bill Cosby, where his court took place, and not in Philadelphia, but, you just have, different jurisdictions in terms of how things are handled. And in some areas, maybe a little bit more lenient than others, but at the same time, again, he was in a place where, you just don't, commit those, type of felonies in certain areas because, again, you can be very targeted, if you are of another ethnic background. And so, how do we teach our children, to, be conscious about where they are, especially, in other places. So I think there's a lot that we still have to, to consider, in terms of how we work with, those who, are in the judicial system, and how can we, like you said, get the requisite sponge, and that's the whole, purpose of what we're trying to do with some of the young people we work with here. But I just wanted to, again, just, those were the thoughts that I had with Bill Cosby, Malik Mills, and then I was thinking about the Starbush situation, because there's been a lot of, community groups now that's talking it's all about justice, but at the same time, again, how do we deal with that? And then at the same time, the forgiveness, or whether or not the person who actually was the person who made the decision to call the police, and now that person, being transferred to another place, but still they're moving to that area where that person is, so the person, should lose their job. So there's a lot of things that factor into that. But we know that situations occur all around us all the time.
Well, I honestly don't believe that person should have lost their job. I mean, they learned their lesson.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But, they deserve a chance to still work.
I think that's the forgiveness, isn't it? It's kind of forgiveness for him to gain understanding. Yeah.
Starbucks had its half day of.
That's not till May 25th, isn't it, or something like that? Not until the month of May. 29th.
But then I'm glad they're not going to shut down all of them.
Mm-hmm.
All the corporate stores.
No, this is a happening.
Just come to my house.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, well, I don't know how I didn't listen to when those guys were interviewed, but,
They know that.
so I don't know what they said about the person who called the police. So I'm not sure. Did they sort of forgive the person?
You mean
The two guys?
the two guys? Probably.
The interview I saw, it seems like they're being very quiet and very peaceful about it.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a civil suit. They have a lawyer that's handling that part.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't really have anything negative to say about the gentleman who made the call. But they seemed to want to express that it was not a right action. It's not acceptable to treat people because of their skin color just for meeting.
And I don't
They
think
were
this
really
is the
calm
first.
about it.
This is the first time. Apparently, this cannot be the first time that this has happened to anybody or any African American. I think with this incident, it just happened to be reported. You see what I'm saying? Because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Starbucks evidently had a lot of issues with, because if you look on the web, Twitter, whatever, yeah, there's several other incidents with Starbucks. But you're right. I think this one is the timing.
Yeah.
I really do.
Exactly.
And I also think it has a lot. What George is saying, and what Audrey is saying is that it seems to me like the 13 states, the primary states that were part of the formation of America, everything's coming back to clean out all that pus and women. It seems to me like brotherly love keeps coming back to me, and I think we don't really know what that means. We as a nation do not believe what we say we believe. Like, we don't really believe in family, obvious because of the shootings.
We don't believe in our own Constitution.
Yeah. So I think that's the poison that's being pulled out of this American system. Like, all the things that our kids see as hypocritical are really coming to the forefront in the media and the news.
But doesn't love and forgiveness go hand in hand? I mean,
I think that's why it's happening.
A multitude of entanglement. So
I think that's why it's happening now.
Yeah.
Because we have that love and understanding.
Right.
There's more of a, if you bring it to the surface, there's more of that.
And just to reiterate, I know that on May 19th, they're shutting down all of the Starbucks, and they're going to have a training, for, all of their employees and staff. So they're going to be shutting them down on May the 19th.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though, that what you were saying, those two guys are staying pretty quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have a civil suit, which they're entitled to, because, I mean, Starbucks policies shouldn't have been what they are. But anyway, it's interesting that they are not doing anything to precipitate these protests and whatever.
what do you mean?
They're not out,
They're not out in the midst of these people who are protesting.
Oh yeah, the guys.
The two
Okay.
guys, yeah.
Okay.
they're not
they're
perpetuating the
remaining
example
quiet
of blacks just getting out there and being supposedly angry for no reason.
Sign
Yeah, they're not.
everything.
Yeah, they're not perpetuating that.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of a change of heart right there
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how you react to something.
And it goes to show you too, black people can be civil. We don't always have to be out there with that kind of stuff.
Well, what we typically label.
Yeah,
ourselves as.
yeah.
Yeah. We don't have to.
That's a
You know, someone, you know, mentioned in terms of, love and forgiveness. And, again, I just say, why did it happen in Philly? We, like I said, there's incidents that happen all the time, in terms of other cities. But I think that there's just, maybe some kind of a point that, the creator, looking at, I guess Philadelphia in a way that things need to just come to the light, where hopefully we can channel, our energy to be able to see, unity come, in that way that we can appreciate that love and forgiveness. I think in 1 Corinthians it talks about the 13th verse, love, faith, and hope, being the three virtues in terms of how hopefully we can see, carrying ourselves, in that way that no matter sometimes what we go through, that hardship, that we can still see the, the faith and knowing that we can see the change for the better. We can see, the hope, to know that even though it may appear to be no way out or no way to, recover, but we know that, our faith, will continue to, help us to, deal with how we see things with our natural eyes, which is not really how we look at things. It's from, our belief. To know that the Creator knows all things and able to help us to endure all things. But I think a lot of people, especially our younger generation, don't see that. And maybe that's, again, where we need to, appreciate our continued, fellowship to know how to deal with it.
Well, George, I think too, when you say faith and belief, and this is what we're espousing to younger people, faith and belief. But yet they see people behaving in other ways that are the antithesis of faith and belief.
Yeah.
So it kind of sends a mixed message. I mean, the church kind of sends a mixed message about all that. And I think the kind of faith and belief you're talking about is a lot different from what the message that the church gives, because we operate out of a faith and a belief in terms of a knowing. There's no doubt there. But what young people see in faith and belief is doubt and regression and hypocrisy and all that kind of stuff. That's why it's hard for them to accept that and sort of believe.
Actions don't line up with what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think if we can talk to them about having some experience and a knowing, and we can help them get to that point, then things will line up more for them in terms of how they see faith and belief.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I believe that things are happening like that, and we just need to be open, not to exclude, those who we feel are not religious persons, but more importantly, those who have gone through hardships. And this is where, at the coffee shop, again, where some of you, have been, that I see a lot of nurturing going on where you have those who may have been incarcerated, for whatever amount of years, talking to, some of the younger youth who have a felony that they're able to get expunged only because they're listening to those who have gone through the experience, where I think that type of hope is giving some of our young people an opportunity to appreciate, what some of the elders or some of the ones who had that life experience is reaching back to let them know that they can change. So, I believe it's happening, but we just need to be conscious about inclusion, where we don't, because someone made a mistake, that we don't write them off, in terms of not being able to bring healing back to, a particular community. And so, we see it and we experience it. And I think that's another example. Last night we met at the 8th and Diamond Recreation Center, where Wells Fargo wants to come in, and they're doing a lot of renovation. They're doing a lot of housing development in the area now. So a lot of things are changing, but there's people in the community that have an interest in terms of trying to make sure that they can see the needs of what the community sees as being important versus just what they want to build. So I think there's a resurgence, of people who have lived in the community for a long period of time, where we got to begin to, like you say, have our voices be heard in a way where it's not just what corporate, wants to do, but what is really the needs of the community. And so, we're, in that process now, just trying to develop, an advisory council that can address those needs, right there, particularly at 8th and Diamond. But I still think, it extends back from things coming to, sort of like here in Philadelphia. And I just, see, some good things happening when people can be exposed, to their history or being exposed to the journey that we all have gone through or continue to go through in terms of how can we be a light to others and how does that play out, in terms of the things that we should be teaching. So I guess the question that I would have, to everybody, where do we see the greatest need in terms of how we can begin to see this transformation of family, the cohesiveness? I mean, is it in the schools, or is it, in the community, or is it in the home? What would be that first area that we think we need to address? Any thoughts?
I think it has to be what we put in the macro, first of all, so that people begin to think a little differently. Because if we put it in the macro, it's going to get into the homes, into the schools, into everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's helpful, and that's helpful, also because I think that, the law of thinking is the critical thing. I think in most cases, people possess physical and mechanical skills, where there's a lot that we can do physically, but I think it comes back to the mental thinking. And that's an area where, we try to encourage, take the time to read. I'm doing community service, out in the Philadelphia community in terms of those in the program, and a lot of times, what we're trying to encourage them is in your community service, still take the time, to read or to try to better understand. And that's a hard thing for people, just, to sit down and read. But I think it's something that, we still got to stress, if that makes sense. But, again, today, as I said before, when Pastor called me this morning, he asked if I would, just be able to share some thoughts in terms of, what's happening in Philly, and at the same time, where, a lot of the energy is right now, and what we have to, be conscious about, as you say, in terms of putting that in the macro. And so, I sincerely, appreciate, just the spirit and the energy, of us, being able to know that we have an opportunity, to change things. We have an opportunity to bring, that energy in the macro to our community. But I know that there's a lot that's going on in Philadelphia right at the present time. And I'm just trying to be, thoughtful and prayerful and meditating on what can, I continue to do to help make a difference. But I know in our dialogues and in our travels, I truly appreciate the time that we're able to spend addressing these concerns that we all have. So I'm good. I'm good. Unless there are any other questions that anyone has.
Do you think Bill Cosby gonna serve some time?
Yes.
After you call the judge?
Yeah, I do. I mean, only because, in terms of just the Norristown court system and how they, feel about this situation, they're really going after him. I mean, if it was up to them, they would have had him going out in handcuffs, right after the trial. But because, they were saying that he's not I don't want to say a criminal in terms of, killing someone or risk, to the community, they kind of just gave him a situation where he's now on a home arrest.
But you know what, George, seems to me like they try to break the African American man. It's like they try to break you down like a shotgun or something. And with the Caucasian, it's like, okay, you got to serve this time because you did it or whatever, you did the crime, but for some reason it just still seems like they're trying to break you down, just break your spirit. That needs to change.
Yeah, and Evelyn, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Evelyn, and that's the thing. I think that when you look at, people of color, or you look at the African American male, it's like the system sometimes can go after a person, with the determination of breaking. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The spirit, of an African American man, and because it's him, it's so hard because a lot of people, especially in Philadelphia, and I'm not just in Philadelphia, I think all over, kind of looked up to him, but the things that he's done in the past. So when you talk about, going back 20 years ago or whatever in terms of when this happened, and now you look at it years later where it's coming back up, but he who had not sinned, let him cast the first stone.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, again, because of what he did, I don't condone that.
Right.
I think that the women have a right, to express themselves. And I know we always talk about the importance of the respect for femininity. And so I deeply appreciate the voices being heard. I truly appreciate the women feeling that justice was served. And I'm just only concerned about, those who have vengeance. You know what I mean? In terms of how it's coming out now to attack, the African American male. And so I'm saying again, it's just, something that we reckon with, something that we have to deal with. But is it out of malice now, that people would like to see him get locked up for 30 years? And I think it's three accounts, in terms of his conviction.
Mm-hmm.
And so each account has 10 years. So there's a possibility that he may say 30, or it could be 5, but they're waiting for the next hearing, sentencing to make their decision. But it doesn't, it looks tough. It looks tough. And like you say, he's 80 years old. So, depending on what the verdict is, if he does get that, that's a lot of time, where he'll be there. But, it just makes us think,
Yeah, and I know like you said, he's done what he's did. But and my thing is, okay, if you go, and I'm just being honest, if you gonna do this to Bill Cosby, y'all should have been through Donald Trump in jail. Although I know he's got some things he got to do or whatever, but if anybody should have been gone or got convicted, should be Donald Trump by now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? All these dirty people. But I don't know. That just bothers me. It don't sit right with me. The system is so. They need to take the blinders off justice, because justice is not blind. It's corrupt.
And that's the word that resonates in my spirit, the system. And the system, is definitely something that, like you say, starting with President Trump. We can just see that, there's so many new sets of rules, sets of laws, all this coming in and changing things up. And for some people, they're able to, be acquitted of something because of the system of laws that may be applied, in terms of how they wanted to see it.
Yeah, and I'm just recalling what I saw earlier this week with the judge, the black woman that came before the judge about some situation, and the judge just berated her. She had no time for her, no compassion for her, nothing. She just yelled at her and told her to shut up and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lady died a few days later.
Yeah.
I mean, that just kind of broke my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. It seems like everybody wants to try to break our spirit.
Right.
But we
rise. Yeah. Still we rise. So it's just.
But yeah, you're right. It seems like
yeah, I feel frustrated, George. I really do. It just hurts. But we know that everything is being restored, and we can't look at what's on the surface. I know that. But still we have to talk it out, get it out.
And I think that's the healing, that takes place for us, that we're able to, get it out, in that way that we can truly understand how to work with the law. And when I say work with the law, I'm not talking about the set of rules that the government has, the set of rules that the judicial system has, but, what is the word of God? And if we look at the first and greatest commandment, that if we shall love the Lord our God, right, with all our heart, mind, and strength, then that's the first commandment. That's what I try to live by. That's what I try to, make sure that even though I understand the laws of rules of, the government to a certain extent, but I know it's the law of the Lord. And then in Psalm 19:7, it says that the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul, and the testimony of the Lord is sure, making simple right. So, I'm saying, how do we deal with the law, of who we are, the Elohim? How do we deal with the law in terms of who we are? And I think that's, the point of emphasis that I try to, just share when we talk about creating clean heart and also God and the right spirit. So what is the right spirit? And I think it's exactly what's, happening now, is that we're able to converse with each other, realize that we're not alone, but we constantly battle the system. And the system is meant to enslave us. I think we talked about it before with the 13th Amendment, right? That the 13th Amendment says that anyone, who has a felony is still a slave, to the Constitution. So when we talk about a person having a felony, that's still enslaved.
Yeah.
Because the system, has the jurisdiction to be able to say, what it is. So I think there's a lot, as you say, Evelyn and others, that it starts, with up top, but I think things are coming to a light that we can just see that there's a lot of, confusion, that's happening in the natural, but in the spiritual, I think our peace of mind comes from when we're able to appreciate knowing who we are. And I know that's something that Pastor Richardson, all of us have talked about, because when you know who you are, then sometimes we have a better way of just being able to handle the situations that we face on a day-to-day terms. So I appreciate, Evelyn, you sharing that in terms of how you feel. But I think with the feminine energy, I just, pray, that again, as we, come to submission, and when I say submission, I mean in terms of the men, being able to appreciate the feminine energy, and I just have such a respect for, for the feminine energy and for the women that I submit myself in terms of trying to see the importance. But I just pray for those who want to be vindictive. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, because if it's the right spirit, then we ought to, be able to submit to one another, in love.